lesson we're going to look at rounding to the nearest whole number. So on the board there's a question, round 8.7, obviously that's not a whole number at the moment, that's a decimal number, because you've got a digit after the decimal point. So round 8.7 to the nearest integer. Now please don't be put off by that word. Integer is another word for whole number. You need to be aware of it though, because if you didn't understand that integer meant whole number in this question, you wouldn't know what degree of accuracy you were going to round to. So please now take on board, if you see the word integer, it just means whole number. So we're going to round 8.7 to the nearest integer or whole number. We need to decide whether 8.7 is closer to 8 or is it closer to 9. And one way we can decide is by drawing out a number line. So at one end of the line I will put 8, and let's label up my number line now. So 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, 8.5, 8.6, 8.7, 8.8, 8.9, and then finally 9 or 9.0. So there's my number line. The number we are considering is this one here, 8.7. We have to decide whether it's closer to 8 or is it closer to 9. Well, on the number line you can see that halfway in between 8 and 9 is this value here, 8.5. 8.7 is to the right of 8.5, so therefore it's closer to 9 than it is to 8. So we can write 8.7 is approximately equal to 9 when rounding to the nearest integer or whole number. Sometimes, however, we might decide that we don't want to draw out a number line. It might be a little bit too time consuming. So there's other ways that we can round correctly to the nearest whole number or integer. When rounding to the nearest whole number, we need to decide whether the digit in the units column is going to stay the same or does it need to be rounded up by 1. So is the units digit going to stay the same or is it going to go up by 1? And to do this, we can look at the digit in the tenths column. So that's the digit that comes directly after the decimal point. So the first digit after the decimal point. If that number in the tenths column, so the one after the decimal point, is 5 or more, then we need to increase the units digit by 1. Let's have a look at an example. So this is the digit currently in the units column, the 6. We need to decide whether that is going to stay the same or whether it's going to be increased by 1. And to do so, we look at the digit in the tenths column, the first digit that comes after the decimal point. Because that first digit after the decimal point is 5 or more, yes it is 5 or more, it means we have to increase the value in the units column by 1. So we can say 6.67 is approximately equal to 7. We have increased the value in the units column by 1. We don't need to put down 0.00 at the end. We go into the nearest whole number and we can just simply write it as 7. Let's do another one. We'll do 12.921. So the value currently in the units column is the 2 there. To decide whether that's going to stay as a 2 or whether it's going to be increased to 3, we have to look at the digit in the tenths column. That value again is 5 or more, so therefore the 2 has to be increased by 1, so the 2 is going to be increased to a 3, So it's approximately equal to 13. 12.921 is closer to 13 than it would be to 12. Remember, halfway in between 12 and 13 is 12.5, and 12.921 is more than that, so it's closer to 13. Now the next example here is 2.5. Now if we draw that out on a number line, 2 and 3, 2.5 is exactly halfway in between. So you might say that it's equally close to 2 as it is to 3. You're correct there. However, there's a convention, and what we have to do, whenever you are halfway in between two values, as we are here, you have to round up. So let's make a little note of that here. When the value lies halfway between two whole numbers, or integers, we must round up. So 2.5 is approximately equal to 3. We've done the same thing again. We've looked at the digit in the units column, which was 2. Then you look at the number in the tenths column, the one that comes after the decimal point. If that's 5 or more, you need to round up the value in the units column. So because it was a 5 after the decimal point, the 2 have to increase to a 3. So we say that 2.5, although it's exactly halfway in between 2 or 3, we always have to round up to the larger value. So 2.5, we say, is approximately 3. Now, if the tenths digit is less than 5, the units digit does not change, it stays exactly the same. So let's have a little look at some of those questions. So the value in the units column is 8. The value in the tenths column is 2. Now that's less than 5. So the units column stays exactly the same, so it's going to stay as an 8. 8.2 to the nearest integer or whole number would be 8. And let's do another one. The value in the units column here is 5. The value in the tenths column is 4. That is less than 5, so that the units digit stays exactly the same. Remember, in this case here, you would need to include the 700s and the 6 tens. So to the nearest whole number, it's 765. And the next one here, in the units column, we have 0. In the tenths column is 1, so that's less than 5. So the units digit stays exactly the same. It's going to stay as 0. So just to summarise at this point, when rounding to the nearest integer or whole number, we look at the digit in the tenths column, the digit after the decimal point. If that number is 5 or more, so 5, 6, 7 or 8 or 9, then you increase the units digit by 1. However, if the number in the tenths column, so the number after the decimal point, is less than 5, so if it's 0, 1, 2, 3 or 4, the digit in the units column stays exactly the same. Now, some of the questions can be a little bit trickier, and these are the ones when the units digit is 9 and needs to be increased by 1. So let's look at a couple of those examples here now. So we're going to go through the same process again. In the units column, we have the number 9. We look at the tenths column to see whether or not we need to round up the 9. So because the number, or the value after the decimal point, is a 7, we need to increase the 9. So if we increase 9 by 1, it becomes 10. So 9.76 to the nearest integer or whole number is 10. And another one, again, in the units column, we have 9. We have to look at the tenths column to see whether or not we need to round up. So in the tenths column, we have 8, which is 5 or more. So we have to increase the 9. Now we cannot make that 9 a 10 as it currently stands, because we've got a digit in the tens column. So what you can do is you can look at it as 489, and we can increase that whole number by 1. So 489 plus 1 will give you 490. And the next one here, again very similar. In the units column we have a 9. Let's look at the digit in the tenths column to see whether or not we have to round up. So in the tenths column I have 5. So yes, it's 5 or more, so I have to round up that 9 to, well, I have to increase that by 1. So let's look at it as 49. The whole numbers are 49. If I increase that by 1, it's going to give me 50. So 49.528 to the nearest whole number or integer would be 50. Now sometimes you can get questions that involve units, so we'll have a little look at some of those just to finish off. So the first one asks us to round 6.73 minutes to the nearest minute, so the nearest whole number of minutes. So we can do the same process again. In the units column, there's a 6. We look at the value in the tenths column to see whether or not we need to round up the units. So in the tenths column, I have 7. That is 5 or more. So the 6 has to go up to a 7. So 6.73 is approximately equal to 7 minutes to the nearest whole number of minutes. And the next one, we've got £26.37. We need to round up to the nearest pound. Same thing again. In the units column, I've got 6. So we look at the digit in the tenths column, which in this case is 3. Because that number in the tenths column now is less than 5, the units digit stays the same. So we need to keep the units digit as a 6. So to the nearest whole number of pounds, we're going to have £26. The 6 is staying the same because there's a 3 after the decimal point. And the last one, we're going to round 234.57 metres to the nearest metre. So this time in the units column I have 4. We're going to look at the value in the tenths column again. Because that is 5 or more, I need to increase the units digit by 1. So 234.57 is approximately equal to 235 metres. We had to increase the 4 to a 5 because there was a 5 after the decimal point. And remember, 5 or more after the decimal point means you round up the value in the units column. So to summarise now, just to finish off, if there's a 5 or more after the decimal point, increase the units digit by 1. If the number after the decimal point is less than 5, the number in the units digit stays exactly the same. And that's the end of the lesson.